Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Melanie Gray with another episode of Code Calm, the podcast that is geared to giving you strategies to overcome stress and live with calm, wellness, and positive intention. Today, it is my great pleasure to have as my guest Dr. Kelly Dries, Ph.D. RN, a seasoned nurse educator, a transformational leader with more than 3 decades of experience in nursing education and leadership. She leads nursing program success at Walters Core and hosts the Lippincott Spark podcast, highlighting innovation in the field. Dr. Dries has launched trailblazing programs to expand access, address workforce gaps, and has served in key roles, including those of dean and as a national consultant. Her research focuses on leadership, civility, AI, and inclusive excellence. She holds a BSN from UW-Milwaukee, a master's degree, and a Ph.D. in leadership from Cardinal Stritch University. Welcome, Dr. Kelly Dries.
Thank you. Thank you. It is such an honor to be here. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Well, I'm excited to have you as my guest. Dr. Dries, you have had 3 decades of experience in leadership.
I have, like you said, been in nursing education for about 30 years now. And having that experiencing shaping kind of that academic strategy and driving innovation. I'm proud to say led many nursing programs and also allied health programs, health sciences as, a faculty and program chair, associate dean, and a previous dean of nursing at a university and a college in Wisconsin. My leadership lens is really grounded in building kind of strong cultures. And I really believe that, one has to kind of prioritize that psychological safety and that civility and that clarity. So, I work as the director of nursing program success at Walters Kluwer and the host of Lippincott Spark podcast. And again, my work is really, helping nurse leaders and faculty and try to strengthen the programs. And the bottom line is prepare future ready, nursing workforce.
You had shared with me that you like to lead with integrity. That's important to you. And we know that in higher education, unfortunately, it's often known for the lack of integrity and cultures that are, let's say, less than kind.
Yeah.
How do you change that? How have you been able to create teams that grow, that thrive, and work together harmoniously?
Yeah. Yeah. Easier said than done, right? When we're leading kind of in a transformational way, when you look at the nursing literature, it really talks about people don't thrive in pressure. They thrive in a very healthy environment built on trust and meaning and psychological safety. And so for me, leading well or living whole, it really starts with that culture first. I intentionally choose kind of that clarity over chaos or purpose over pressure or relationships over transactions because processes are important, but to me, the people matter more. Because if you don't take care of your team or your operations, they're going to fail. So it's not about doing more. Leaders can burn out super fast. It's about creating those conditions so that your team can really sustain, their very best work. And that means they need to feel seen. They need to feel heard. They need to feel valued. I think at its core, the influence first is through kind of inspiration. You have to be an inspirational leader, not controlling. It's not about micromanaging. It's about really helping people see what's possible and kind of giving them kind of confidence and support to really act on it. And it starts with authenticity. People can feel that within 15 seconds of meeting you. They know if you're authentic. They can feel it from you. It's like that aura that you give out, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're leading from kind of your true values, and people are feeling that, it gives them a sense of safety and trust. And then there's courage. You have to have that lead with courageous leadership. And that's tough sometimes. It can be super hard. And I think that speaking the truth when it's uncomfortable, stepping into uncertainty sometimes, I remember advocating for some learners, some students that when I worked at one of the technical colleges, and it was the easier choice would have been to stay quiet and just make a decision, but to be able to get people at the table, key stakeholders, and then ask yourself, as I'm making a decision as this leader, how will it affect the key stakeholders, in this case, students, their ability to practice safely? How will my decision impact faculty? It's not easy. It's a tough call, but integrity as a leader, I think, is the anchor, kind of the alignment between what we say and what we do. Think about it that way. So when I moved from the frontline roles to an academic leadership, I really made myself kind of this promise that my decisions would reflect my values that I teach. I will be a fierce advocate for my faculty, lead with honesty, transparency, equity, respect. And, that alignment, I think, builds trust over time. And that's how you build that trusting culture. And I think, Dr. Gray, that doing the right thing isn't easy. It is really hard sometimes, but sometimes it means standing alone. Sometimes it means challenging kind of that status quo or making choices that are not going to be popular. But integrity really brings that different kind of reward. For me, it brought me peace, the kind that lets you put your head on the pillow at night and, you led with purpose and, courage and compassion. And that's what transformational looks like. Transformational leadership looks like to me.
Well, academians, educators, they're all sometimes, you have many big
Yeah.
brains in the room and everyone has an opinion and
Yep.
wants to be the same on the stage in the room.
Oh,
Give
yeah.
an example of a time where you were under stress, under fire, having to address the needs of multiple stakeholders, but you were able to still remain calm and get a positive result. Or maybe you didn't. Do you have a story to share?
I'm very intentional about reducing stress of myself and my teams. It's, again, not easy, but it's acknowledging the reality, first. You can't be Pollyanna like, oh, this is great and we'll get through this and you rah rah. Yeah, you want to stay positive and have that optimistic viewpoint. But at the end of the day, you need to, be real with your team and acknowledging that reality that high demand environments don't become calm by ignoring the pressure. You can't ignore the pressure and brush it under the carpet. Your team will become calm through clarity and trust and predictability. That's a key piece. The example I have is when we had to navigate through COVID, right? In 2020. Here it is, March of 2020. I've got 3,000 students, allied health nursing students, trying to get through classes and clinical, and talk about pressure. One day you're teaching as, going along on your business. And then all of a sudden by that next Monday morning, you have to flip all your classes to online, and faculty didn't. A lot of them didn't know how to teach online. And then all the students in clinicals can no longer go to clinicals. We can't go to the hospitals anymore or some of the different units and departments because of COVID. And rightfully so, right? We were all navigating that. But that's the pressure. That's the stress. I really tried to focus on creating that structure where there's that uncertainty. We didn't know what was going to happen. So here's the clear priorities, the non-negotiables. We need to get these students through clinical. We need to make sure that we're giving them exceptional instruction and that we are supporting them along the way, trying to make clear decisions and communicate. And even if you don't have an answer, just say something like, you know what, I'm not sure yet, but I will get back to you. And then always circle around and let your teams know what you know. That way your teams aren't carrying that unnecessary cognitive load. That's what it's called. You don't want that in their brain about, what's happening and all harried and whatnot. I think when people know what matters most and what doesn't, they can breathe again. Providing that vision, I think, is definitely key. So I try to bring the calm as much as I can. Because if you show up frantic as a leader, if you show up, coming unglued, as they say, teams are going to feel unsafe. So regulate yourself first, slow down the pace, slow down the conversations, pause before reacting, and kind of naming what's in my control and out of my control. What's your sphere of influence? What can I do here? And that might be, in my case, really creative on where we send students to clinicals so they can meet the outcomes of the course.
What are you seeing in the field as you are consulting with other educators? What are you seeing? What are you seeing of their needs to reduce stress, and how are you helping them with a
Yeah.
code for calm?
I think going back to bringing that calmness, psychological safety in a team and when you're working with your team is non-negotiable. You can do this by kind of making sure that they know they can ask for help if they're struggling. Debrief without blame, kind of that, we call it that postmortem assessment, like, okay, the good, the bad, the ugly, what happened. And we have to be open to having those conversations about workload and capacity and whatnot. And I think I see stress really escalating with teams when they feel alone or they feel afraid to speak up or that there's going to be some sort of backlash, so that calm grows when people feel supported and heard. And I think, the big thing is protecting your focus as a leader. We simplify where we can, right? And we say no to unnecessary work and build in moments to reflect and recess or, kind of reset yourself. So I think calm is not a passive thing like, oh, I'll just be calm. No, it's designed. It's very intentional. So when leaders are very intentional about the culture that they build, the boundaries that they set, the presence, I think teams don't just manage their stress better, but they sustain their energy to do kind of their best work, even under pressure.
Well, under pressure, leaders are carrying work home with them. Their teams have access to them after work hours. People are
Yeah.
answering emails and texts during weekends, PTO. How do you help set boundaries for yourself as
Yeah.
a leader, and how do you help your team members? How do you model that for your team as well?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's intentional focus. We all have different roles and responsibilities, right? Within your job, but outside your job too. And I used to say, okay, no emails on weekends and nights and let's set boundaries and whatnot. But then I realized some of our teammates, they put their kids to bed and that's the time they can, quick get on some emails and send them out. I've been saying, if that's the time you need to work because that gives you balance and whatnot, who am I to say, no, you can't do that. But maybe to be courteous to your teammates, maybe schedule those emails. So do them at night, but schedule them to hit your teammates' inboxes at 8 a.m. the next morning. I do that all the time. If I am working at night or on the weekends or a holiday or something crazy like that, unless it's a 911 where they have to get it right now, schedule it out. You can hit the little button, there's a drop down, and you can schedule it any day and time you want to hit their inbox. But to be honest, I think one of the leadership challenges that I have and that I'd like to really work on with my team is to protect your focus. And there's so many things going on. It's like this Wild West half the time of competing priorities. And when that happens, I can immediately feel it in my leadership, but also I'm sure my team feels it too. I think you have to be really intentional about how you start and end your day. So my first 30 minutes is to kind of pause and to think strategically and connect with my team in very small, kind of meaningful ways, kind of acknowledge their work. Maybe I ping them on Teams and say, hey, how you doing? I really liked how you did this, or send them a quick email if, that's if you're virtual. Walk past their desk and say something. But that intentionality kind of cast it forward. And then at the end of the day, you're, slowing down just a little bit at the end of the day again and ask myself, what went well? What needs attention? What should I do differently next time? Like, wow, that was a hot mess. I'm going to do better next time. I might address this in a different way. And I also name gratitude. I think that's super important to say, I'm super grateful about XYZ and the moments that really mattered. So those are the bookends. The start of the day, the end of the day, and even Fridays to get ready for a Monday. It just grounds you and you're more clear instead of reactive. And I think they remind me to really focus about it's not about doing more. It's about kind of leading better. So hopefully the listeners will start to think about, where would a little bit more intention give you kind of that greater impact? And maybe what's one small little thing you could do or small little choice that can, maybe protect what matters most.
Thank you for that. Has there
Yeah.
ever been a time in your career where it was difficult to set boundaries and you found it more healthy for you to pivot to a different role? And if so, was that hard?
Yeah. I think it's always difficult because, you give it your all. You are, you know, building those relationships and kind of inroads and all the different, I'll say, the complexities, navigating through those. And you put in such hard work and time. And I always felt like, oh gosh, do I have that purpose here? Am I moving the needle? And am I, creating kind of a sustainable, healthy workplace. And at times I feel like leaders are in a role and it's all about timing. You could come into a role and you're the best thing since sliced bread and you happen to move the needle in so many different ways. And then after a while, it's like, you know what? I think it's time to move to a different role. And that takes a lot of discernment. It's not easy at all. Anytime I had left a job, I would always think about the people that made such an impact on my life and, hoping to sustain those same relationships and knowing that, I was given different gifts and talents, and perhaps those talents could be utilized in a different, uh, from, different place, different role. And you take kind of that big step and it's a little scary because you don't know how things are going to turn out. You're kind of starting over, but you know that you will be supported, hopefully by friends and family, and even the people that you are leaving that will remain great colleagues when you get to that next role. So it is tough, but sometimes in order to continue to grow as a leader, you make those decisions for yourself and your family and for those who you will serve next.
So you've been really clear. The nuggets that I've heard you speak are the importance of leaders being integral, of being thoughtful, of taking that pause when they need to, of planning, thinking before they speak, and being real sensitive to the culture that they're creating with their team members. In that, as we get ready to close, what would be the code for calm that you want the listeners to commit to over the next week?
I think about stop trying to do everything and start leading with intention. You can't be everything to everyone, but setting those boundaries and I think is really important, and being ruthless about your priorities. What matters most? Let go of
I
the
love
rest.
that. Ruthless.
Yeah, just you got to be ruthless about it. And, that stress immediately, I think, decreases. And focus is not a luxury. It's leadership, and be a student of leadership. Learn more about how to sharpen your saw and, take yourself to that next level. Intending to that culture it's not just about those outcomes. It's not it's a little bit soft. It's when people feel safe to speak up and ask for help and be human, they don't carry that stress alone. You're there to help and pay attention to your team and model what you really want to see. So I guess for me, calm is a leadership choice. And when leaders create that clarity, psychological safety, and boundaries, burnout loses its power. It's gone and people can do their best work.
Love that burnout loses its power. And I personally believe that being burnt out is a choice, and it is a choice that we can choose not to make. Dr. Dries, where can the listeners find you if they'd like to connect?
I am a big LinkedIn person. So right on LinkedIn, Dr. Kelly Dries, message me on LinkedIn and I'd love to hear from your listeners. And thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Dries. And so if this episode of Code Calm was a blessing to you, please like and follow us. And remember to live whole and live well. Make it a great day. And thank you.